All right. I'm Briian Cronin. I'm lead programmer at Unknown Worlds, which means I don't know really what that means. I'm basically just doing anything that needs to be done. I specifically focus a lot on releasing the game, so we patch every 2 weeks at least, and so I focus a lot on that. This talk is a little bit more light than Max's, but I hope you enjoy it still. And that is also Twitter and email, because we're in the new millennium. So first, I should probably mention that I actually came from a school very similar to this. I was at a community college in San Diego called Palomar. That I don't know the details, but it was very similar. So in 2004, I was very much in your position. And so my history is I actually left college to go to a small mobile game developer in Carlsbad, California, and made this game, the Da Vinci Code, in 2005 with the movie. So this was a mobile game. This was before iPhone and all that. So this was for Brew, the devices were called, and J2ME. So it was, I did a lot of C++, and yeah, this game was very bad. But I did the programming, and the programming was okay, so I was alright with it. That's kind of how I started off. So like you move around the world. It had some really bad mechanics where like the two characters would follow each other for some reason, and like to jump over a laser, you had to line them up, then face them the right way, and it was bad. But it was great. That's how I got my start. And a friend basically was working at that company, and he said, "Hey, we have an opening. Are you interested?" And kind of went from there. So definitely novice. So I got my start. And then, that company only lasted a few years, maybe till 2007 or so. And I worked at another really strange company. It's based in Hollywood that did overlays for sports, like NFL overlays, and we were all game developers. They hired us to like do stuff, but they didn't really have. I did a lot of weird stuff, like a mall kiosk demo to navigation at a mall in 3D, and just a lot of weird stuff, like using the Wiimote to. I don't know. It was just weird. But the important thing here is that motivated me to make my own games. So wrong way. In 2008, I decided, these indie games were starting to take off, and the idea was that you don't need to work at a big AAA developer to make games. You can make a game like this. So this time I knew I was very naive going into this. I knew this was way too ambitious. It was me and my friend. He did the art. I did the code. This was a networked game, all using semi-realistic physics over a network, over the internet, which was a very bad idea. But it was fun, and it took us like 3 years to make, and we did eventually release it. And it did okay. But it eventually led me to San Francisco, where I got a job at Unknown Worlds. So yeah, we make Natural Selection 2. I came in about 2010 when there was just starting to become a game, sort of. Like characters could move around and shoot at each other, and we got like 10 frames per second, maybe 15 in like a good room. And over the next 2-3 years, we got to this point where, the frame rate is a little bit better at least, and there's more stuff going on, and there's more of a game. So that was a big learning process. But yeah, so that's basically my history. So I guess I wanted to try and give some advice, some of which is probably going to be similar to Max's. So yeah, getting a job versus making games. I was very focused on getting a job. When at the time, though, like Max said, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities to make your own games. In 2005 versus 2008 even, there was actually a big difference. Like getting on Steam back then was not possible, where 2008 we did manage to do that. So now, yeah, just make games. If you want to get into game development, just do it. You don't need to worry about an industry. And you might eventually want to join up with other people in a more professional setting, and that's the best way to do that is to make games. Like the candidates that come to us, the ones that attract me most are the ones that I've seen are just making their own games, at home or whatever with friends. The ones that are just motivated and actually doing it are always the best candidates in my mind. So yeah, don't focus so much on getting into the industry. Just do it. And then something that also worried me a lot a few years ago was sort of the catch-22 of, well, they want people with experience, but I can only get experience if I get hired, and it's that whole thing. And it's basically the same thing as the last one now. I'm starting to feel, but yeah, don't worry so much about that. Like there are companies that a lot of them will say we probably say this, we want people with 10 years experience, whatever. And it's not always true. Like sometimes if you submit, a cool demo, like submit a cool video of a game you're making, show them you're motivated. There's a lot of cases, a lot of companies, especially in the Bay Area, that are just looking for some entry-level positions. The main thing is just show them that you're able to do it. So yeah, what are companies looking for? I guess I can't really answer that, but I can answer like what a company like Unknown Worlds is looking for, or I guess what Unknown Worlds is looking for. So in terms of generalist versus specialist, I think generalist is a good way. I'm definitely a generalist. Just the idea of really specializing in something like graphics or physics simulation. One time I remember hearing about a guy working at LucasArts, I think it was, who for like 2 years, he was just off in his own back room, like in a closet they had him. And he was just the guy that was making the lightning effects for Force Lightning. I asked the guy, like he said, he never talked to this guy, he was just making lightning. And eventually the time came to integrate it back into the game. It was just a mess. Like the integration process was totally, like they just forked completely different code bases. I don't even know if it was the same language. And he said after that was complete, it was the best lightning he had ever seen. So I guess the point is, like, you could, if you're the type of person to see yourself as a specialist, if you're interested in graphics programming, you don't even really care about games, but graphics programming is a good, games are a good place to do that. There's definitely options for you. And if you're really good at what you do, there's a lot of companies looking for a lightning guy. Well, a lot, like 5. But if you're the best lightning guy, you'll find a job. So it's a good way to go. But generalist is also a great option as well. So there are a lot of smaller developers now, size of Unknown Worlds. And we definitely have more of a generalist kind of atmosphere. So a lot of our developers, we have the kind of company where if there's a problem, we like to just encourage people to fix the problem. So if you come to me and say, hey, there's a problem, the game has an error in this case, I'm going to say, oh, cool, you're going to fix it? Like that's just the atmosphere I like. I like when people kind of take on the responsibility and so that's the kind of thing that we look for. Is just I think a specialist wouldn't fit in so well in our worlds because we are such a small company and we do have that sort of atmosphere.
We specialize in everything.
Yeah, we specialize in everything. That's another good way to put it. And in terms of non-technical skills, karate is definitely up there towards the top, which I guess you could still say is a technical skill. But I'd say just like reiterating again, responsibility of being able to take on a task, and communication is obviously really important. Being able to talk to other people, that type of thing, which I know a lot of us have a hard time with playing all these video games and stuff. I can't think of anything else non-technical skills. I don't know. Can you give me it?
Well, it's good, I think, if you have some art skills, or even if you're not like artistic, if you're familiar with how to use the tools that artists might use, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, spend some time learning Photoshop. That's something I've actually not done, but I use Paint.net, which I think is superior. Those types of tools are definitely good. I learned how to use PowerPoint too, which is good.
Looks like you mastered it.
Yeah, well, this is Google Docs, but it's the same thing. So in terms of schooling, I'm definitely not an expert on this, but again, looking at like the type of candidates that come to Unknown Worlds, generally schooling itself, like what school someone went to, is not that important, to me at least, when looking at a candidate. It's again like looking at the projects they worked on at school. A lot of the sort of game schools, like what are those, DeVry University, is that one of them? Or what's one in Florida? Full Sail. Those types of schools, they'll do like projects every semester, every year, and seeing what types of projects they worked on, how they contributed, trying to get a feel for what part they had in the project is pretty insightful. But in general, I don't think that what school specifically someone went to is that important. It's again more just that candidate showing that they are able to do the work. But a lot of people do get a lot out of school, I know. So it's kind of whatever works best for you. But for us at least, it's not a big factor. Oh, so this is a very specific piece of advice. Go to game jams. So for some people who maybe don't know, what game jams are is it's like usually a weekend. You often go to a location, you're locked in, there's like Cheetos and stuff, a lot of Mountain Dew, and you spend the weekend making a game. So you team up with, maybe anywhere from 2 to 4 people, and there's usually some sort of theme announced, and it's a very creative thing. It's very much about just making games, so it's not so much about technicalities. I mean, I've gone to game jams and learned a lot of new. I used Flash once when I never used Flash before. So it's a great opportunity just to learn stuff, to network with other people. And yeah, it's a lot of fun too. So yeah, you're in the Bay Area, you have no excuse. So the Bay Area is a great location for game jams. You could probably go every weekend if you wanted, to be honest. But these are some websites you could consult. I haven't been to the Hacker Dojo myself, but that's more of a hacker space. But I think they do have a sort of an indie game jam every year there. Then there's a global game jam, which just happened in January. That's happening every year. There's usually 3-4 Bay Area locations, so it's within 15 minutes. This site here, Game Jam Central, has a lot of links to other ones. This Dark Side Jam is happening this weekend, I think. I don't know if there's still space, but this one they're hosting it at NASA, so that's kind of weird, but probably gonna be a lot of fun. And Ludum Dares, this is one that it goes on like every month or every 3 months or something, and you can just do it right from your computer. That's more focused on an individual project. So if you want to learn how to do every aspect of the game, making sound, art, and trying to get it all done in a weekend, it's a great way to do it. So go to game jams. So I guess I'll talk briefly about the team structure at Unknown Worlds. So in terms of programming, we have sort of a light gap between engine and gameplay. And like I said before, we still encourage every programmer to take responsibility. So I focus mostly on gameplay code, but I'll still go into the engine whenever needed, and Max will do the opposite. But there's some benefit to, there's a piece of code maybe I'm working in every day for a week, and then there's a problem that develops in it. I'm going to be a little faster at fixing it than someone else. So that's kind of the only real specialization that we have currently, I think it's fair to say. And we have about 2 engine programmers, 2 gameplay programmers, and 1 guy who kind of goes in between. So the release process is a big part of the release process. So basically, we release very often on our worlds, and even throughout beta, we put out something like 50 to 70 builds throughout the beta. So we're patching every other week, basically. And it's a big task, and so the whole infrastructure is developed around it. And the programmers are really responsible for making sure not to break anything. And as we get closer to release, there's a lot of effort that goes into coordinating with mappers and other artists, making sure the build is in a good state. So that's a big part of how the team kind of coordinates in Unknown Worlds. It's really around those releases. And other roles in the company, which obviously aren't as important to talk about, are mappers. We have a lot of mappers all over the world. We're a very distributed team. We have 8 people in the office, and then something like 4 mappers, mostly in the UK. We have our sound engineers in Australia. We have a bunch of play testers in Europe, in the United States, Canada, all over the place. So we have our lead artist, Corey, is in the office, and otherwise all the art is pretty much elsewhere in the world. Either we do a lot of outsourcing for models, specifically in animations, and we also do some of that ourselves through contractors that we work with pretty closely. But yeah, it's a very distributed team, and that has a lot of interesting dynamics that I won't go into too much here. But so in terms of recommended tools to just get into game development, or just play around with it as a hobby, the number one I recommend is Love 2D. That is a 2D Lua-based kind of platform for games. You can make games on it. It's not specific to games, but it's very simple, which is what I like. It's kind of, if I want to draw a circle, there's a function. It's like love.drawCircle, and it will make a circle appear on the screen. And it's Lua, which is a very simple language. I think is a great language to learn games on, because it's a very the rule set of the languages is very simple. There's you could pick up in a couple days and just be making a game with it without worrying too much about if you're not using C++. Memory allocation is a big task to learn in and of itself. And the other examples, Unity is an obvious one. That's for 3D games. That's a great example of a tool to use. So that is another one to play around with. It will definitely teach you like the structure of how a game is made. Both of these, in terms of what is a main loop, the concept of a game object. And Unity has a novel approach to managing game objects, kind of like what Max was talking about with the different components. They have a component system that kind of plug and play type interface. And then these last two, if you are into C++, these are what I made Zero Gear, the go-kart game I showed earlier. I made them primarily using Ogre, which is a graphics engine, and Bullet, which is a physics engine. So if you're interested in getting into sort of that AAA or C++ development, I guess, I think these are two very good tools. They're just libraries. They're very simple for the most part, and I think they're pretty representative of what a game looks like in terms of gameplay code, what type of stuff you're going to be dealing with. So those are great things to look into. And yeah, love. So that's all I have for the actual talk part, and there's my information. I guess now we'll just take questions if you have any. Oh, I did want to mention one other thing that I didn't get to put on the slide, but I think it's really also valuable to learn a lot of different programming languages. It's something I've personally got a lot out of. And some specific examples are Python is great for general scripting. If you need to, we use it all the time for we have a bunch of data and we need to analyze this data and get some, chart or plot it out somehow. Python's a great just general purpose scripting language. We don't use it in the game code necessarily. Lua is a lot of game developers use Lua. It is pretty popular for game development. I think it's a very interesting language in and of itself. And C, C++, if you've not used C or C++ and you want to go into game development, I think it would be great to learn for maybe some abstract reason. And a couple other weird ones are Erlang, which is a functional programming language. So it's wildly different than Java or C++, but definitely will expand your mind a little bit in terms of what kind of programming languages are out there. And then IO language is another good example of a weird language. It's just weird, but it's a lot of fun. And that's it. So anyway, anybody have any questions?
There was something on one of your slides that made me think of something, which was you mentioned, I think it was other roles or something like that. Oh, release process. Yeah, that was it. If you are interested in being maybe part of the video game making process and you're kind of technical, you're not like an artist, but maybe you feel like some of this programming stuff isn't really for you, at a big company, there's all these things that happen behind the scenes to get the stuff you're working on to the thing that can go out to the public or can be distributed within the team. And that's kind of that release process, either releasing publicly or releasing internally. And there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be done there, like maybe writing Python scripts or doing other kind of system administration type stuff. There's a big, meaty technical thing there that's not so much like programming in C++ that maybe would be something you'd be interested in.
It's pretty hard to find a person who's really good at that specific task. Yeah. It's pretty specialized.